Very good evening, listeners. You may be present now, you may be present in the future to share my views, my feelings on one of the great stories of Leo Tolstoy. The title is God Says Truth But Waits. And I would like to interpret this story in different ways from the point of view of modernistic thinking, postmodernistic thinking, and traditional thinking as well. So, first of all, something about the story itself in a synoptic sense. Tolstoy is a master short story writer. His short stories are considered to be immortal ones, and if the world scholars, critics, and creative shows happen to collect even 100 stories from around the world, perhaps they will find at least 5 stories of Leo Tolstoy alone among the 100 stories that they choose for the world readers and to world uh, scholars as well. Leo Tolstoy writes philosophically. He writes very morally, and his main purpose is to have a kind of metamorphosis in the thoughts of the modern people. He wants people to get onto the right track of life and living, because in his own life, in the early years of his life, in the early adult years of his life, Tolstoy was a vagrant in the sense that he didn't have an organized life. Born in a very rich family, he had so many liberties, so many comforts, and he didn't have much control over his senses as well. Senses in the sense that he would allow them to indulge in whatever his senses wanted to indulge in. Tolstoy later on, gradually, because of circumstances that he got acquainted with, and because of the developments in his country and the developments around the world, he realized that we were living, understand living, and thought out ways of living, not all right. This world is made to continue to be in the right shape. Whoever made this world, and human beings, the supreme beings made by whoever made all kinds of creatures in this world or in the universe, you can say, the makers might have thought of giving liberty, freedom to the creatures, particularly the human beings. But they also might have thought of testing and trying the human beings and other lower animals in the sense that they wanted these creatures, including the humans, to practice, to exercise some restraint, to think reasonably, and to live in the spirit of live and let live, not in the spirit of live and live merrily, eat, drink, and be merry. This philosophy of life is the philosophy of the vagabonds, is the philosophy of the people who don't have any sense of future. This is the philosophy of the people who limit themselves to themselves. They don't extend themselves to the preceding generations that they have come from or to the succeeding generations that they have to hand things over. So, Tolstoy himself having reformed, having realized the true nature of this world and the true nature of life and the true nature of a human being, he got onto the task of meditating, walking down the forest patches, walking down the patches of his schools of thoughts within himself, and then he concretized some of his principles of life, some of his values of life. and he came onto the task of creating those principles, those values, those systems that he deemed to be all right uh, in terms of literature. He became a great writer, not in one day, but he became a great writer through writing his novels, War and Peace, Anna Karenina, and writing short stories, writing critics, and even on occasions lecturing or canvassing support for the moral conduct of increasing number of men and women. Wherever he went, in the later stage of his life, he was received as if he was a superman, and he was given the warmth that encouraged him, turned him into giving to this world ideas after ideas, beautiful emotions and sentiments through his chosen language. Tolstoy, therefore, stands very tall among the greatest of the greats in the field of literature, language, and culture. You write literature, you solve language. You write literature with the help of language. So, language and literature complementary to each other, and language literature enrich culture. What is culture without literature? What is culture without language? That culture is supposed to be high, where you have the use of language and where you have the creation of literature in, in the ways that enrich human experiences and that enable human beings to accept challenges, seen, unseen, expected, unexpected challenges. And in my opinion, his writings have great potential to change human beings throughout the world for better conditions, better status. His writings are capable of solving the problems of the world that we are facing today, provided we really want to solve our problems. Sometimes I think that most of the world conflicts, most of the uh, uh, world's disturbances, world's irregularities are because we don't want to get over them. It's not that we don't know the ways, we don't have the ideas to give us light. It's not that we don't have the libraries filled with the books of the great philosophers, saints, and sages, and scholars and thinkers from which we could take up the clues, the ideas, the directions to make our world a better place. But the fact is that the world is so chaotic and so much uncontrolled that we don't want, because those who are in power, those who have the resources, they don't want the world to be all right. If the world becomes all right, then they won't have the pleasure of indulging in worst kind of rivalry. Perhaps it is their kind of tastes of life. They are not tasteful people who know how to make this world better, who have the means, who have the agencies, but because of their bad tastes, they don't want to take such ways. Well, now I come to summarize this story titled God Sees Truth but Waits. In the title itself, there are grounds to raise questions, but that I will take up later on. This story is a Russian story, and the main character of this story is Askanov, and he is a small trader. He has a small family. He has in his family himself, his wife, and his son, young son, very young son. Other members of the family are not mentioned in the story. he might have started living with his individual family. And it is said in the story, Tolstoy writes about him, that he's a happy go man, but honest man. He trades in very honestly. He makes a profit, but he never exhausts his customers, his buyers, or his trade friends. He goes out to enjoy, but doesn't go out with the intention of harming anybody or cheating anybody or indulging in things that is not all right for his health, for his family, and for the happiness of the entire environment. He's disciplined in that sense. So an occasion arises when he has an opportunity to go to a trade fair to deal in things that he has, and also to see how he can expand his trade. But on the way, because of the unfavorable condition of traveling or moving ahead, uh, the evening falls, and for the night, he needs to rest. So he takes a place, he takes a seat, a room in, in an inn, and there he rests, he plays on his music, he enjoys and looks forward to the dawn, to the morning when he would like to resume his journey to the trade fair, for which purpose he had set out from his home. But the night that he has to spend in the inn is a very bad night in his life, a night that will spoil his image as a simple, honest person, a night when he is terrified to the extent of mortal fear because someone, a criminal, happens to hide somewhere because he had murdered a man. And after committing the murder, he wanted to hide himself. So, with the purpose of getting some shelter, some hiding space, he enters Askinov's room in the inn. And Askinov is terrified, and he's terrified to the extent that he feels that if he asks him a few things or resists his stay in the room, he might get killed. So he just keeps mum. And Askinov later on tries to show up, to resist. Perhaps he thinks that this man might have committed a murder, he might even murder, he might even rob of all his things. And something like that is likely to happen when the murderer gets afraid of being surrounded. He feels that he might get surrounded. Policemen might have come in search of him. So he puts the blood-stained knife in one of the bags of Askanov and he disappears. Policemen were already after the murderer, the criminal. So they were searching different places, including some of the places in the inn where Askinov had stayed. And finally, they come to his room. Things are looked around, things are searched, rummaged to find any clue of the murderer. And finally, when they searched one of his bags, they find the blood-stained knife. And then they suspect, because he was there in the room, so they suspect Askiner to be a criminal, to be a murderer. And they think that the proof is there, very much evident, that the knife is there and blood, fresh blood perhaps. The crime may have been committed 1 hour before, 2 hours before. So the fresh blood all over the knife. Askina, he tried to defend himself. He spoke the truth, but he became so nervous that he could not convince the searching policeman that the knife in the bag was not his, and somebody else had put that knife in his bag, whom he had seen, but about whom he didn't have any knowledge. But the policemen, they are policemen, because and they go after the proof. And the proof was there for them that the knife bloodstain was in the bag. And they did not have the wisdom, they did not have the patience to study, to read the words of Aksenov. So they took him along with themselves, thinking him to be a criminal, a murderer, and then subsequently he was tried. He was put on trial for several weeks. The trial went on. His family was contacted. His wife came in support of her husband, Askanov, and she took uh, the responsibility on herself to save her husband. She spoke on oath that her husband was a regular man, a good man, honest man, and that could be testified by the people in the neighborhood. And that she insisted in her statements that she wouldn't ever believe that her husband could ever commit a murder, could ever even wound a person, let alone committing a murder. But the proofs were not there to prove the statements of the wife or the, you can say, the statements of Askanov himself. The proof was against him, blood-stained knife that had been found in his bag and that had been presented to the court of law. So finally, he sentenced, not to death, but sentenced to 26 years of imprisonment in Siberia, one of the coldest places on earth. And the life of Askanov, his family, was horribly affected. Affected what? Horribly, you can say, damaged forever, destroyed forever. The wife of Askanov had a little baby. Perhaps the father of that baby, Askanov, had not even been used to looking at him nicely or even thinking much about him, as he didn't have much time to spend with the baby. So when he went to the prison, he only thought what would happen to his wife and to the baby. Who would take care of them? How would they live? How would the child grow? But he could do nothing. He had to go through the sentence, and nothing could uh, uh, nothing could happen to help him. So he started living. Now, towards the as the time passed, he started getting in touch with the books, good books, the books that had been written on the lives of the saints and sages, and the other books that had moral lessons. So, in the jail, he would spend much of his time reading such books, exercising, meditating, thinking of what this world is, how innocent people also get into unending suffering. Innocent people get criminalized, and they lose all the liberty of life. They lose their family. They lose their individual liberty. In fact, they get absolutely destroyed, and they have to live in that condition, and that is worse than death. But that was his destiny, perhaps, as that is the kind of destiny to many people in the world, that in spite of their being innocent, being good, they suffer. And in such situations, when you see people suffering without having committed any crime, without having committed any sin, without having broken the laws, then you have questions to yourselves. Why? 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 Why do people suffer when they should be working and enjoying their life? And those who should be suffering, who should be going through the suffering of their deserved punishments because of their sins, because of their crimes, they are free, scot free, and they enjoy the liberty that we talk about. Liberty means you go, move anywhere, do anything. So, towards the end of his sentence, uh, he becomes a saint, like a saint, a prisoner, but a saintly prisoner. And everybody, because so many prisoners there, maybe scores and scores of prisoners, and everybody looks upon him with regard, with respect, because of his saintly behavior, because of his saintly words, because of his personal conduct. So he becomes a virtual saint there, although a prisoner. And the jail authorities don't think in terms of releasing him, even when they are in the know of the fact that Askana, who had been brought to this prison as a criminal, has lived a very simple and very holy life. And everybody loves him, everybody respects him. So they should have considered, how could that happen? How could a criminal become such a nice person, such a loving person, such a beloved person of other prisoners? They didn't have any plan of releasing him. And Askinov now was almost in the last phase of his life. Sometimes he would think of his family. Sometimes he would think of the possible release of his from the prison and the possibility of his getting back home. But then he would not love that thinking, because he would be afraid of the situation. His son, in his absence, uh, might have grown now adult, and he would not recognize him. His wife might have left already the world because of sorrow, because of grief, or even if she survived, even if she was there by then, she won't also be able to recognize Askanov, her husband. So he acquiesced to the situation, became philosophic about life. But see the turn of events, the irony. Now, this justification or unjustification of the title of the story, God says truth but waits. Why should God wait for justice? This is the question that will come. So let me first finish summarizing this story. So the criminal who had put the knife, blood-stained knife, in the bag of Askana, his name was Mako or Mako, M-A-K-A, and he had been a habitual criminal. He would commit a crime, get sometimes caught, would go through the punishment, get released, and then again retracting, again getting on the same supposed path of crime. So he was a jailbird sort of person. And this time around, he had not committed a murder. He had only stolen a horse or taken away somebody else's horse. And he was caught red handed. And then he was brought to Siberia jail as a prisoner. uh, Not because of that murder, because he was the real murderer. This man, Mako, was the real murderer. And he was the one who had put the bloodstained knife in the bag of Askinov. But he didn't go there to jail as a murderer, but only as an ordinary criminal, ordinary stealer, thief. But he was so clever, so cunning, that within a few days of his stay in the jail, he wanted to come out of it, to escape it. So he started digging a tunnel under the wall of the cell or the room where he had been put. And he was almost done with his task. He could have escaped any time. But this Askina, the saintly person, almost old, bearded, he could not sleep through the night. He could sleep for a couple of hours. He would get up, he would meditate, he would think, means he would live like that. So he got to know something was happening in the jail. And he could also sense that someone was responsible for the tunnel that was about to be, you can say, completed for the purpose of escape. And he kept mum. He thought, what was the use of telling anybody, informing the authorities about what he felt about the tunnel to be getting in the completion stage, because he became uh, a believer, an absolute believer in the justice of God. He thought, why should I complain against a man whom I don't know? And if I complain, he might get punished further, and that would be of no use to me. So I should keep mum. But he was caught because the jail authorities happened to get him on the job of finishing the tunnel, or in the process of escaping from the prison. He was caught. So he thought that perhaps that person, somebody might have reported, but it was not the fact. So when the jail authorities asked Askinov that you must have seen, you must have come to know, you must have sensed about this happening in the jail because you don't sleep during the nights. So tell us. But he didn't. He said that why should? Again, the same thought persisted on his mind. And then Macker knew, Macker knew that Tolstoy knew that he was the one digging the tunnel, trying to have an escape route. And he was sure about that. And then somehow people asked him, this Macker, that why had he to be imprisoned, and then he explained the circumstances that once he had committed a real crime, but for that crime he was not captured. He was captured only for horse trading and all that. So people got to know that he was a criminal, a hardened criminal, but in Siberia he was not for that crime. So the situation came when Mecca, when he was sure that the person who had been implicated or who had been criminalized for that murder was that saintly person, Askenov. Then he went to him during the night, that very night, when he could not escape and he was caught. He told him that he was very sorry for making his life spoiled forever. It was he who had committed the murder, and it was he who had put the knife, bloodstained knife, in his bag. So he begged of him to pardon him, and he started weeping, this Macker, a kind of change of heart because of the saintliness of Askinov, who could have reported, but he did not. Even then, he was caught, but he had no role in getting him arrested for this attempt to escape from the jail. And then this person, Askinov, starts weeping almost with this Macker. He says, this is how the world goes. This is how the justice comes to people. That if you commit a crime today or tomorrow, you get caught by the arms of laws. You get into the space of punishment, but it takes time. So now, when this truth comes out, the jail authorities, the governor, everybody comes to know that an innocent person who got separated from his family, loving family, spent his 26 years of life almost, and he was innocent. Then they even make papers, or they think of making papers to release him. But Askinov says, no, no. He doesn't need any release, and he doesn't have any expectation or any ambition or any wish to get back home. He would stay on in the jail as long as death doesn't come to take him away. So, in spite of the requests of the authorities that he should prepare himself to go back home because he would be honorably released, he didn't concede. He insisted on staying on in the prison until he died there, or until whatever happened, because after the time is over, you may be even forced out of the prison. But that time had not come. However, God saw the truth. The real murderer, now he was captured, and this innocent person, he had to be given a place in heaven. So that very night, after a few hours, he breathed his last. And his soul, nobody saw where did the soul go, but the soul must have gone to heaven. If you believed in the values, the principles of Tolstoy, because he made a character like that. So this is the story that a criminal comes to punishment, comes to justice that it deserves towards the end of his life or after decades and decades. But an innocent person, a young trader who had decades of life to enjoy, to, to develop, to make others happy, and to live a good normal life, that young trader's life got hellish and he left his life like that. Now the questions arise. God sees truth, but waits. So justice is done. Truth has been seen by God. And according to that truth, things are apportioned, things are given. But why this delay? Now, the modern interpretation, traditional interpretation, you can say first traditional, then modern, and then postmodern. So, traditional interpretation of this system of distributing, apportioning justice on the side of God could be interpreted as that destiny, that fate is everything, destiny is everything. You get to suffer even when you have not done anything wrong. But people believe that in the past life, you may have committed wrong things, and the sins and the wrongs could not have been met with the proportionate punishment. So carry over means you might have suffered, you might not have suffered, but the suffering that you have to do remains, and that carries over to go through in the next life. And that is why people, they interpret, they tell one another that you suffer now even when you have not done anything wrong, but you may be suffering because you did something wrong in the previous life. So previous lives sins punishments carrying over, that is. Or okay, it happens to many people, if not to all people, it happens to many people. They suffer even without committing sins and crimes, committing wrongs. So you do. But modern interpretations, why? Why? Because you don't know. Modern people, educated people, you believe in the laws of Newton, that each action has a reaction equal opposite. But if you have not committed the crime, why the punishment? So modern people, modern leaders refuse to accept this thing that destiny is there, fate is there, because you don't believe much in those things. You believe that if you work hard, you get fruits. If you laze your time off, then you don't get anything. If you have to catch fish, you have to go down the water, or you have to do some adventure. And if you don't go down the water, if you don't do some adventure, then you are not likely to get any fish. The idea is very clear: work and get the fruit. And sloth away your time, laze away your time, and you just remain empty handed. That is what science tells us. So, God sees truth but waits. Why does he have to wait for giving justice? Why doesn't he intervene immediately after the crimes are committed? Criminals should be apprehended. God should have the system that if somebody commits a crime, then he should be told immediately that you have no freedom now, you have no liberty now, you are under arrest, or you have to suffer. You suffer according to the crime you have committed, and then you can be free again. But this doesn't happen, so it is extremely confusing, intriguing. Nobody knows. Postmodernist interpreters, critics, readers, they question everything. Even this that science says something, and you believe in that, but according to your belief, things don't happen. So postmodernist readers, critics are more, you can say, aggressive in asking. They say that where is God? Who is God? To see the truth. and to do justice. It is man, because this universe is godless universe. You have absurdist writers, poets, Nietzsche and all that. You have Sartre, and they believe that human beings have to suffer, and they suffer because of their own misdoings and all that. And there's no God to reform you. There's no God to take you back to the right path, because it's a godless, dark universe. So, postmodernist critics, readers, they have questions, and sometimes some of them have similar questions, and sometimes they have contradictory questions. That a man commits a crime because a man is forced to commit the crime. A man who doesn't commit a crime is a timid person. He suffers, but he doesn't go committing, he doesn't go improving. If a poor person is poor, hungry, and if he sits hungry, waits for somebody to give him some alms or to give him some donation, then it's a timid person, not bold person. A poor person, if he's hungry, he should seek always to get his hunger out. And even if he has to steal, even if he has to commit murder, he's justified. People say like that. Some of the people, they say that life is for one time, it has to be enjoyed. So what is wrong? You commit a crime, you rob somebody of millions of dollars, millions of rupees, and you get off. And if in the process of getting off you get caught or you get shot dead, okay, that's all right. Anyhow, you have to die. Who is there to live forever? Who is there immortal? Everybody has to die. And you die for a cause, because you are hungry, you are deprived, you are suffering, and you want to let the soul of your body feel some freedom with the resources that you have taken from others. So you are doing some good to the soul that is inside your body, because when you suffer from hunger, you suffer from cold, you suffer from excessive heat, or so many other kinds of things, and then it is your right, it is your human right to go through something that can release you from these sufferings. The criminals say, okay, one day we have to die. Everybody has to die. So if you can say love someone, and that someone doesn't, you can say what you call require your love, then you can say you go against that person. You even damage the life. You even burn the person, shoot that person dead, and you say, okay, it's all right. Now, after doing that thing, if I'm caught, if I'm punished, if I'm beheaded, all right, because at least I could try to do something to satisfy my this life. So postmodernism, all of us know that you have questions and doubts and inquiries and all that, but this life cannot be run simply by raising questions and raising doubts and arguing satanic arguments that God is supreme. Why should he continue to be supreme? So Satan convinced Eve that you could become God and God would become subsidiary to you. So our you can say world is confronted with this problem of what we call multiple thinking. Okay, you think 100 ways, but out of these 100 ways of thinking, the thoughts that come, that evolve, we should try, okay, this is all right, everything is bad, everything is bad, nothing is absolutely good, but out of some good we have to choose. Oh, these are some some things that are tolerable, these are some of the values that should be applied to everybody. But that is not happening. We only go classing, confronting, you can say slowing others down, and the noise. Our life has become noisy. Solutions don't come. We have, see, seminars, symposia, all kinds of things happen, international talks. For 10 years, talks go on and go on and go on, but you hardly have solution. It's why? Because everybody wants to take this position, that my position is the best position. And you never, you can say, give some way to the others. Uh, I think if people start thinking in terms of others also, that if I had been in others' position, what I would think. So give and take means a kind of mediocrity, a kind of moderation is needed. Extremities of all kinds are very bad. Even Lord Buddha, whom we worship as an enlightened person, and who has given us messages as to how to make our life tolerably livable, how to have salvation also, and salvation coming to us through extinction of our desires and all. So even Buddhist ways suggest that life has to be lived moderately. So moderation in our behavior, moderation in our thinking, because simply arguing and counter arguing and having ideas after ideas, and most of them contradictory, that is of no use. So this story, God sees truth but waits, to my mind, is a story that sins don't go unpunished. Sinners don't go unpunished. Criminals have to account for their crimes today or tomorrow, sooner or later. That fact is proved by the punishment that is meted out to Mako, and he has now to stay in the prison forever. And this Askino, who had been implicated, who had been charged with a murder, and who had no life after that, destroyed individual he lived as, but finally he has a moral victory that he was not a murderer. And people have love for him, people even weep for him, and he dies as a saint. So that is moral victory. Physical suffering, family separation, all the grief that could have come uh, on a very ill-fated person came on him. But finally, a kind of redemption. So is that the system of justice, that you suffered and finally you get, you can say, discharged, you get unblemished, all the blemishes get dissolved, and you come clean in the public. And that is your reward for suffering. But this justice is not very convincing to most of us, including me, myself, as a human being. That moral victory, all right, why not victory always? Why at the end? As in the cinemas and all that, we see that the villains and the bad people, they suffer. They suffer when they have enjoyed the earthly life. When it is time for them to die, they die. They die because they are shot dead, or they are put in the prison for 2 3 years, and then they naturally die. And good people, their families suffer all the life. And finally, people come to know that good people suffered, and they suffered creatively. But this is not very convincing. So, in my opinion, God is kind, God is there. This universe is not godless, it is not that dark. He is the monitor, absolute monitor, or the powers are the monitors, absolute monitors. But it would be better if gods, uh, uh, whoever they are, wherever they live, they discharge duties of justice in time. Because it is also said, justice delayed is justice denied. So if Macker had been proved innocent at the earliest, he would have lived a normal life. And that was his right to live. His family had the right to live that way, but that did not happen. So this justice, delayed justice or moral justice, okay, all right, to console, but it's not heart feeling, it's not pleasing. So, and dear listeners, prospective listeners, because right now you may not be present, you don't know when the stream starts. So maybe in the future, maybe I only hope that in the future you may happen to hear me, listen to me, and that would be my reward uh, of a sort. So rewards could be of other types also, but let's see. So thanks a lot. God bless you. God bless me. God bless us all. Bye bye.